The Next Level Supply Chain with GS1 US, a podcast in which we explore the mind-bending world of global supply chains, covering topics such as automation, innovation, unique identity, and more. I'm your co-host, Reed.
And I'm Liz.
And welcome to the show.
So Reed and I just had a conversation with Lisa Anderson from LMA Consulting Group. She's worked as a consultant for the past 18 years with all different players within the supply chain. She talked to us about what trends she's seeing, what risks she's seeing within the supply chain, what kind of technology can be used to answer some of those questions. The technology ranges from EDI to digital twins and kind of everything in between. It was fascinating to talk about all of the different players in the supply chain and how they need to come together and have cross-functional teams and discussions. She talked about having this control tower, having this thought of a control tower out in the future to be able to see where everything is within supply chains. It was just awesome. It's a great episode. Enjoy.
Good morning, Lisa. Welcome to the show.
Great. Glad to be here.
Well, we appreciate you getting up so early because you're calling in from California and it's like 10 o'clock on the East Coast. So it's a little bit early for you. We appreciate that.
It's a great topic. So
let's just jump right into that. If you could just give us a little background on yourself and LMA Consulting.
Sure. So I am a former vice president of operations and supply chain for a mid-market manufacturer. And I've been now consulting for the last 18 years with a specialty in supply chain management.
So you've seen a lot.
Absolutely. I work with manufacturers and distributors, and there's always new trends occurring, complications. There isn't a day that goes by where some new challenge hasn't arisen. It's a pretty typical day.
Yeah, especially probably in the last several years. Nothing is the same as it used to be. With all of your knowledge and background, what do you see happening today in the supply chain that's new and different?
There's a lot going on that is new and different, to your point. Now that we're post-COVID, there is no normal anymore. We're not going back to some sort of old normal. We're in a new normal, if you will, which really includes, a lack of labor across the board. Actually, I went on a trip to Europe this summer, and I belong to several different groups that have global members. And I have yet to find a location in the world that seems to have plenty of labor. So labor is a short supply no matter where you go. That's one challenge that definitely has provided some unique opportunities in the supply chain because the bottleneck keeps moving to different places in the supply chain, but it's causing problems like potential strikes and a whole host of activities. So that's one trend that's happening. Another is that the risk in the supply chain is really elevated. Although we don't have the same issues that we had during the pandemic currently, the risk is just extreme between what's happening in Russia, Ukraine, what's happening with China. They're threatening of Taiwan and that whole region, the South China Seas. There's risks of weather events, which we just had another weather event or weather-related event in Hawaii. So there's just a ton of risk in the supply chain.
You brought up some really good things. I mean, labor is a major issue, right? And we have the baby boomer generation moving on out. We have new groups coming in. There's new interest, but supply chain has been one of the largest because of COVID master degrees sought after. They've just seen a complete spike in that, but there's labor at a lot of different levels that we have to address. And then the risks, you brought up two huge ones. We have political risks, but we have environmental risks as well that we're all experiencing. Is there one more trend that you're seeing that's a big rock out there? Not a technology. I'd like to separate the technology out. I'd like to jump into the technology separately, but I really love that you highlighted labor and political and environmental risks. Is there any other big rocks?
I would include regulatory risk in that as well as part of that other risk category. Another one that we're seeing in the practice is that a collaboration across the supply chain. So from your customers to your suppliers, the successful companies are finding ways to implement programs like sales and operations planning, sales inventory operations planning, which is one of our specialties. But it really is critical today because you have to be able to tie together your demand with your supply and your customers with your suppliers. The whole supply chain got out of whack during COVID, and it really hasn't gone back into control, if you will, completely. And it just is a different ballgame. So you need to have the ability to communicate, standardize, and have a cross-organizational approach if you want to succeed in today's environment.
What are some popular technology trends that you're seeing today, right now in supply chain, or whatever you're seeing that's big trends that are people diving into right now?
Well, it's really the technologies that support customers and support, this lack of labor, if you will, the ones that support the mitigation of risk. So what that really means is that predictive analytics is very popular because after all, we have to figure out where to focus our attention. We don't have endless amounts of resources and we just don't have endless amounts of time. The people who are successful in the next several years, I think are going to be the ones that lead their industries for decades to come because it's going to be similar to the Great Depression in terms of the amount of volatility going on in the supply chain. Not because we're going through a Great Depression, at least I hope not. But basically, I think there's going to be more opportunities than ever before, except for during that time frame where more people shot to the key in their industry. Predictive analytics to understand where you're going. I, of course, like the supply chain softwares. It depends on the industry. I am all for common sense technologies. It's demand planning for industries that require high volume of SKUs and promotional activity and that type of thing. That's quite critical. But really, digital twins, e-commerce, actually the softwares that help with the customer and serve the customer experience improved. So that can be just simply advanced planning softwares, because how do you have the right product in the right place at the right time is quite the challenge in today's environment. And, there's softwares that, help with the SIOP, sales inventory operations planning type of process. There's other ones that support it, right? We're working with a client right now on a simple procedure, which is preparing for a inventory audit, which is definitely foundational, right? It's not rocket science. Cycle counting. However, they're going to move to barcoding and better ways to track inventory and automate processes. There's bunches of automation type of software, which is definitely great because in a manufacturing environment, if you can automate a process, you can minimize, again, how many people you need, which you can't find anyway. And you can make it more repetitive quality, improve the quality of the process and the result. There's quite a bit of technology, actually. There's AR, audio, there's on and on opportunities when it comes to tech. Actually, 3D printing, additive manufacturing is exciting because maybe we need to be re-looking at our supply chains in the first place. And we do need to be positioning it more towards customers. So actually, you asked about trends in the supply chain. By all means, reshoring and nearshoring is another trend, and really just expanding manufacturing. You may not be really bringing anything back anywhere or moving it somewhere close. What you're really doing is you're expanding your manufacturing capabilities closer to your customers. So again, it's about the customer, right? And ideally, as you're doing this, you're automating and utilizing more technologies so that you can ramp up quickly with less people. Those types of activities is definitely needed. That can lead you to robotics and some other technologies as well.
So with all of the technology that you just mentioned, which is vast, and you have an organization that has, let's just say in this case, been around for years, how do you know what to focus on when? I mean, what problem are they trying to solve? I'm assuming, and you can help them with that conversation, but trying to figure out what to focus on with all of that stuff must be daunting.
Well, I mean, you're right. I mean, that's actually why with each project that we start, we'll start with a quick assessment so that we don't just do whack-a-mole, because there's just too many priorities. And it really is quite important that you prioritize where you focus attention. You don't have endless resources. That's something that we're recommending to every client that they really need to be doing, is looking at where do they spend their time. But you don't want to get into analysis paralysis. You just want to look at common sense factors. What's going to help grow your customers and revenue in a way that's profitable. and that better supports your people, which could be just simply having them. That'll do it, right? Because you'll have customers, your employees, and your profit all wrapped into one. So it doesn't have to be complex, but you should be looking at what's going to be relevant to you. Unfortunately, a lot of times it's very tempting to follow the fads or what it is that is talked about in the news. Any of these technologies could probably help you, but are they going to be one that's really going to make a difference to your customers, make a difference to your bottom line, or make a difference to your ability to fulfill your customer orders, or better engages your employees? So you really do need to look at what you're doing and perhaps, work with an expert, at least at a minimum, make sure that you're thinking through this before you throw good money after bad, because after all, any of these technologies is going to require that you invest and that you implement, roll out, provide training, education, those types of things.
I love that you pointed out, and Liz, you kind of chimed in there about the prioritization and not chasing just the shiny object or the hottest new trend. I mean, you may need to, right? You may need to put some automation in. You may need to do some other things, and it may be game changing for you. But ultimately, you have to know your business. And then you also have to do what I refer to as just some fundamentals and some blocking and tackling and looking at your business. You said earlier, moving towards barcoding. And for like us, we're in barcoding every day, RFID every day. That's what we do every day. But I've seen a lot of warehouses where they're still not using it, right? They're
Right.
mid-sized companies or they're smaller companies, and they're like, we're not big enough. We don't need that. I was wondering if you can maybe talk about that just a little bit, about like just some of these things that have been proven over decades, tried and true methods that maybe are really, really low hanging fruit where you could really get yourself, or maybe with some of them, you skip over them and move to the latest trend, which is beneficial. But the fact that you said that people need to move to barcoding, I'm like, they're not. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on that.
It depends on the size company. The company I was talking about is a decent size. They should crawl, walk, and then run, but they're going to have to expedite that path because there's many clients that are very interested in barcoding that aren't barcoding today. Sounds like a no-brainer, obviously. However, if you don't have transactional disciplines and those types of processes in place, barcoding could make your situation worse. You have to start with the foundation, although really, that is not going to cut it in the next several years, because only those companies that are pursuing technology and are automating and digitizing are going to thrive. So they have to quickly put those foundations in place. It's surprising how many people are not just doing something as simple as barcoding or pursuing RFID. I mean, it's like that with other areas as well. A technology I should have mentioned, but to some degree it's similar to a baseline technology, and that's ERP. So do they have a modern ERP system? Because that will connect with a lot of these technologies that I was talking about that they really do need. But yes, the standardization of data is quite critical for communicating across the supply chain, which is definitely another trend, actually. And what I mean by that is the visibility of being able to see across the supply chain. If you think Amazon, right, they send you a note saying, this is where your product is on its way or 9 stops away or something. That's where we've gotten used to understanding. And so that type of visibility is going to be critical. And so that kind of leads to supply chain control towers and those types of things as well.
It's just fascinating because that's what we expect now, is that visibility as consumers to know where something is, whether it's, an Amazon or food delivery or what have you. It's just what is expected. And as organizations change and evolve to what consumers expect, I'm assuming it's super important for organizations. One, you talked about that cross-functional, but to know your own supply chain from the raw materials all the way down to the point of sale or food or what have you. Are organizations really leaning into understanding beginning to end of these processes so that they can figure out where to implement the technologies or bring more visibility to consumers or things like that?
Yeah, some of them are. I mean, they're looking at supplier portals to get better understanding of what's coming to them And then from a customer standpoint, it depends. There's EDI in some cases, and certainly blockchain is another technology that's out there, although it's not really widely being used by any means. But really understanding what's on the way to a customer and being able to track it like an Amazon does, that's definitely something that customers expect. And so companies are pursuing how to achieve that so they can at least get that type of visibility so they can provide that type of information to their customers if they call in at a minimum.
It's so funny because you said EDI and I can't program it, but I can talk to it in very detailed ways. If you ever want to go down a rabbit hole, I would love to talk to you about EDI. But it's so funny because it's an old technology, right? But it can be used for that foundational visibility to information across the supply chain. So you almost can look in the past to help you solve current issues. I don't know. It's just interesting that you said.
No, you're absolutely correct. I mean, sometimes we get so carried away with like the latest and newest thing that's coming. What's really the difference for many of these customers? If they're utilizing EDI, why would they need to go to blockchain? I mean, it just depends on what kind of product they have. You have product traceability. I mean, that's a part of most ERP systems anyway. So I'm not suggesting that blockchain doesn't have some advantages, but you can be doing overkill too. You need to figure out what's really appropriate to give you the data that you need so that you can run your business in the way that's best for your customer. If it's not best for your customers, your profit, and your employees, why are you investing this money? So yes, EDI can work quite well. I used to utilize EDI as a part of a VMI, vendor managed inventory program, where we figured out what our number one customer needed at each of their branches across the world. And we sent the product to their branches for them. We won Supplier of the Year several years in a row and reduced both of our inventories and improved both of our profits and increased our sales because we had the inventory where it needed to be. And that was using a supply chain software that's basically forecasting and replenishment type of a software and EDI. It didn't require rocket science.
Yeah, it's crazy how you can go back to basics and use something from the past that is super applicable today. And it talks to the importance of data standardization that you mentioned before, because when you have good foundational data, whatever technology that you end up using, EDI or something super more fancy, EPCIS or whatever, but because we're in standards, I have to ask you a standards question. I mean, we talked about data standardization. It sounds like you are 100% behind standards playing that important role in managing and having a traceable supply chain.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you need to have standardized data. For example, I'm working with another client, an industrial type of client. It has an engineering to order type of a product. And I mean, one of the key things that we did that dramatically helped them improve their customer performance and improve their profitability, actually, and most importantly, allowed them to get the right products ready for sales so that they could increase their sales volume, was standardizing their data. They're engineering to order, so every product is like different, but there was quite a bit of standardization across different groupings of products, and they had different data sources. So, we had to sync the data sources up. So we had to sync the data sources up, standardize it, establish some commonality, and that allowed us to be able to see into the future of what was going to be coming down the pipe and enough detail to get the right types of people for the right areas of the operation, which was important to be able to do that in advance, and to also be looking at what materials needed to be coming in and be on contract, if you will, so that we could support the sales. And that allowed us to decrease lead times and grow the business far greater than they would have otherwise. That was really a part of the sales inventory operations planning process, but it was really the standardization of data. That was the foundation we built in order to make everything work. And in that case, it was simple, in quotes, tools that we put together, although they had robust ERP systems, but if it doesn't sync up and work, it doesn't matter. So we didn't necessarily use something fancy, but it's prepared now so that we can start to use. I mean, part of technology is once you have a standard data or standard platform, you've built a foundation, then you can utilize technology to do it faster, to, be more efficient and be successful. It's a step in the process.
Yeah. And people don't love that step because it's not very exciting to look at your data and figure out who owns it and is it quality and do you need to go back and do some basic foundational stuff to it.
Right.
It's just not exciting, but it's so important to start there because otherwise there's just bad data everywhere and throughout.
Well, yeah, you're making poor decisions is the issue because you don't know. And, you don't have to, like everyone thinks, oh my gosh, it's going to take a year or 2 years. I don't have the resources to clean up this data. So let's find something faster. But it doesn't work that way. Really what you should do instead is, and this is what we did, is start cleaning up the data immediately. But we know that it's going to be a journey in this case. It will take a couple of years to standardize all the data. But you can, again, start with the priorities and start to work in the areas where you have to make some key decisions. You don't need to wait years. You don't even wait months necessarily. You find something that you can do within a few months. It depends on the size, organization. If it's a small one, find something you can do within a few weeks. But basically, you find something you can do where you can make progress and you can make some directionally correct decisions that will lead you in the right direction because you have to stay ahead of your customers, your competition, etc. So, it's a matter of pursuing the path, but doing it in such a way where you don't wait till it's all done to go forward. You do it in a way where you make progress along the way and you can use what you've done.
Yeah. You don't have to single thread that kind of improvement, that process.
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about the trends and the technology. What do you see on the horizon based on the last several years for the supply chain industry? And how do businesses stay ahead of all of that? I mean, we talked about the importance of foundational data and standardization. So that's probably one thing. But what else can organizations do to stay ahead of all of this change?
You really do need to make sure that you're utilizing, if you have a modern ERP system, and when I say modern, it's got to be one that will work with these advanced technologies as you get there. So some of the archaic or really old systems, you're just going to struggle along the way. But if you have a modern system, then really you can just better utilize your ERP system. So, and ERP systems will allow you to standardize your data as well. It'll support that process, right? And it will connect with some of these things we've been talking about. So that's another thing you should be doing. Some of the cool things on the horizon, a digital twin gives you the capability to do like a what if analysis. It doesn't have to be as fancy as a digital twin. Obviously, AI, everyone's talking about AI today. I forgot to mention that earlier, but AI is actually incorporated into many of the modern ERP systems and to many of the functions. It's incorporated into like predictive analytics, demand forecasting, and those types of things. With that said, though, that's an exciting technology. If you add AI, IoT, so the Internet of Things, which really could just mean you're collecting data from your machines. It doesn't have to be so complicated as everyone says, or, you're collecting it from vehicles or whatever. And then you're utilizing something like predictive analytics, and you can use it in combination with, it could be what I would call like a poor man's digital twin. So you don't even have to have something that's officially a digital twin, but something that allows you to do some what if scenarios, look across. Actually, there's companies out there that have designed factories and then ran the what if scenarios and redesigned it before they actually started constructing, which is awesome because they were able to optimize that factory setup through
that's
the use
awesome.
of these technologies. And on the supply chain side, manufacturing and supply chain like go hand in hand. So there's so much you could do, like from the control tower point of view, you want to know where all your, let's say your supply chain is going to have multiple suppliers. It's going to have multiple, perhaps, manufacturers. And it's definitely going to have multiple customers, one would hope, and different levels of customers and transportation partners. And depends on how complex it all is. May have different modes of transportation as well. You want to be able to ideally know where everything is in your supply chain. That would be the ideal state, which is sometimes called a control tower. And then, you could say you have a truck that's going from here to there. You have a container ship that's at this location, you have your suppliers have this type of capacity. And if you could look across your whole supply chain, theoretically, if something happens in, I don't know, well, I hope that China doesn't like go into Taiwan, but I don't know, there's a lot of risk over there. So if something happens, you know where things are in your supply chain and you know where your risks are because you have like your supplier is located in the midst of the hot zone or whatever. You would know that you have an issue. So you're going to have to turn on your backup supplier. So that type of like a control tower type of capability is exciting, although it's complicated because it's difficult to get all those partners to work together. One of the things that's happening right now is like the ports of LA and Long Beach, they have some digital projects going, right? One of the projects is simply to try to figure out that from a port point of view, like what's coming in on what ship, where is it? And you would think that would be simple, but it's not because there's so many different parties involved that don't work for the same company. So if you can do it though, a control tower for your company and everybody is in your supply chain somewhere, you have at least more control over that situation. I'm not saying you should all work by yourself instead of like working on a collaborative effort, because you should work on collaborative efforts that's going to move your company in the right direction. And that's a priority for your company, which if it's not though, so that's like goes back to priorities, right? But anyway, I do think that that's some of the exciting technologies out there. And I've probably forgotten. Actually, another one that's big in supply chain and manufacturing is where you can like look in the goggles and you can see, somebody can show you how you actually work on the piece of equipment you're doing, or they can prevent an accident on a forklift by you saying, hey, you're getting ready to run into something, and like actually autonomous vehicles can stop it. There's like all sorts of interesting technologies out there from that point of view.
All that is so cool. I just envision this. I don't know. We've seen it in the movies, right? You have a boat or a plane or a truck and it's got this on it. It would be really cool that you could very quickly shift. Oh, there's a hurricane coming here. So we're going to, I'm sure it's nirvana, but
that is what is very needed in today's world, especially if you have a global company and you're highly dependent on a supply chain, right? I mean, if you have a regionalized supply chain, it's not so important. You can just keep track of your region.
We talked about those cross-functional conversations. One of the things that I'm working on, and you touched on it very early on in the conversation with the risk and regulatory. And when we start talking about food and the Food Safety Modernization Act 204, where there's just additional record keeping, we keep talking about these cross-functional teams needing to come together because it's not just food safety and it's not just the master data people and it's not just the supply chain, but it's flexing these muscles of not working in a silo. And it seems like there's a lot of problems that can solve, whether it's overall supply chain visibility and cross-functional teams, or it's regulatory, and you can use these cross-functional teams for lots of different things. So it's almost like get your group together and then you can figure out a lot of problems that collectively can maybe be fixed or uncovered.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, the food chain is definitely one where advanced technologies that can standardize data, keep track of the chain, if nothing else, using traceability in ERP, but it would be great to share it and have it quickly available. And then you need to tie it together with which end customer has purchased this food, which many times could be from a store's point of sale data or something. It depends on where it went. I suppose it could have gone to a restaurant or whatever. But basically being able to trace that whole chain quicker can save lives, right? So that would be important data. It's probably similar to the port example. The challenge is getting all these parties to work together, but that could be quite critical when it comes to food safety.
Absolutely. This has been such a fascinating conversation. As we wrap up, because we're getting short on time, Reed and I ask our guests 2 closing questions. The first is around technology. So in your either personal or professional life, what is your favorite technology that you're using or talking about today?
With a client, we're using something that kind of approaches a digital twin. I mean, it's not that, but it's something we actually built that's similar to it, where we can see data across their demand and their supply so that we can make proactive decisions. And I think that's very exciting because we can figure out, should we make this? Should we buy this? How do we meet customer needs, reduce lead times, maximize profitability? You have lots of variables that you can maximize at once. So I think that's exciting. And that also relates really to what could be business intelligence, predictive analytics, and those types of tools. And I think those are definitely exciting as well in today's world. So I think the combination of those tools is something that currently been working on that, has really driven results. It's exciting when you're working with technology that's not just technology, but it's one where you get bottom line results with clients. I think that's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see it all come together. That's the best, is when the light bulb and all of it falls into place. That's awesome.
Exactly.
So the last question I have for you is, you've seen a lot of trends out there. What blows your mind? It can be personal, it can be professional, but what have you seen that you're just like, holy cow, I just can't believe that?
One of the things that's simple, but I think it could be revolutionary, is actually there's two that pop to my mind. One is 3D printing, additive manufacturing, in the sense that it's becoming more widespread. I mean, when it's used for product development, that's exciting, but if you could actually produce something at a higher volume, which is not really there today, but it seems like it's coming, or you could support engines for planes or something like that. That would be quite interesting if you could just print something up as it's literally needed, as complex as that. That's rather mind-blowing. And then, something that I guess it's a little bit simpler, but it still seems quite out there, is the idea I was talking about earlier, where you're looking into glasses, talking to somebody across the world, and they're leading you through a complex, it could be even used medically, right, for a particular surgery or something, or in terms of plants working on a machinery or equipment, or supply chain setting, something that's occurring in the warehouse or in transportation. But I think that that's got a lot of applications that's going to really change how we do business as well.
I mean, it's like bringing YouTube to life in your specific situation, making oceans disappear so that you can be next to the person that can help
like
you.
Virtual reality kind of.
I'm thinking about my kids playing Oculus, and like they literally will hit their hand on the wall because they're trying to do something. Anyway, it's really cool technology that I think has a lot of applications. I love the doctor analogy, just to have an expert be able to be available right there next to you, but not.
And all of these go back to the limited resources idea too, because you just don't have the people that can fly around everywhere doing all this. Your greatest experts that you may really need working on something as critical as food safety, like we were talking about earlier, or a plane that could kill people, those kinds of things. You want your best people working on it, and they could do it from wherever they are in the world. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's really powerful. That's so cool. Lisa, this has just been such a fun conversation from a supply chain perspective, just hearing all of the things that is going on. I loved talking about EDI. Thank you. I never get to talk about EDI. Nobody else talks to me about it.
I brought up the old topic, I guess, but it's still used.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And just, talking about the overall visibility of the supply chain, it's so important and really great. So thank you so much. It's been a great conversation.
Great. Very good. Well, I've enjoyed it as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Next Level Supply Chain with GS1 US. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe to our feed and explore more great episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to share and follow us on social media. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.